Welcome back to The Line. We're still talking immigration. Many of us have seen the Associated Press story about a Border Patrol station in Texas near El Paso, where more than 300 migrant children were being kept without adequate food, water, and sanitation. Teen detainees, I'm talking teenagers here, were the only ones taking care of babies and young children. And despite federal law that says these kids need to be moved into more appropriate housing within 3 days, many of these children in this facility, however, were there for weeks. The public shouted, the government promised a move, but 100 of those kids are now back in those same awful conditions. And Laura, we're bringing together two issues for you. Child detainees have been a flashpoint for migrant surge. Certainly in part two, the immigration is perhaps the central issue of the president's re-election campaign, if a Democrat can make it so, I would think. Enough people paying attention nationally, and is there a bottom here? Is there a point where Americans can actually clearly say enough is enough on this border issue with children? Is this the point we're at now?
Well, you know, I think we passed that point a while ago, but every day we see additional stories that are horrific of conditions and problems. And then we see, like I just saw a story this morning where one of the reporters from CBS was allowed to go in and do a controlled tour where a lot of his observations contradicted what attorneys had witnessed and what they wrote about in some of the legal challenges that they had filed. And so clearly that was there was an effort to address that and have the media be able to, you know, report on, oh no, those aren't the conditions that we're facing here. Look at the box of toiletries that we have and all of that. When we've not been hearing that, obviously, and we've been hearing local reports, regional reports of people, you know, trying to go to these facilities with donations that they've on their own gone out and paid for, tried to show up, and they've been turned away.
That's right.
All of that is I think still an issue, and people need to be paying attention. But in particular, I think in the last couple of days, there's been a story about a young father and his daughter. The daughter's name was Valeria, and I think she was 2 years old. And out of desperation in Matamoros, trying to cross over to the U.S. In the Rio Grande, they jumped into the water, tried to make it across, got pulled under, and died. And so there's been this terrible picture that has been all over the place if you haven't seen it yet, but just the vision of his body floating with her body, and he had actually inserted her into his shirt, and you see her arm still around him as they're floating in the water. And that is a horrific picture. Yeah. And it really harkens back to some of the terrible pictures that we saw in Syria when that country was going through and continues to go through their issues. But we were horrified to see that. And now here in our backyard, we're seeing the same thing.
That's right.
And it's disgusting, and we need to do something about it. And I think that it is going to continue to get more and more heated as far as the presidential politics go. But I think what's really important is that there be some action taken by the administration, by the people in power at this point to address these conditions.
But Mr. Barrio, interestingly, we had someone from the administration stand in front of some judges in the Ninth Circuit and say, we may not have to we don't have an obligation to supply toothpaste, deodorant, diapers, onesies. I mean, if they don't, who does? I mean, it's really quite something. So I ask again, is the public ready to issue a statement here, literally through the political process, about how these children are being treated?
You know, I don't know. I mean, the first thing is the term obligation. I mean, whether or not the federal government is obligated to do a thing, I think the question really needs to be, what should we be doing? I mean, if we're talking, as we often do in political discussions, about where our moral center is and what values we actually value, I don't know that term obligation really belongs in that discussion. It's really more of a question of what should we be doing.
Right.
And I don't know, with regards to the public and what kind of breaking point we may or may not reach, I don't know what the bottom actually looks like. And I think that throughout this administration that a lot of people have wondered, you know, where is the bottom? When will we say enough is enough, or this simply is not something that we can stomach? I think we're yet to see that, because so far there's outrage, to be sure, but what is the outcome?
That's right. Fair point there. Dee Dee, you know, interestingly, a little twist on this, there's been some reporting that some of our counties in our state are making a little bit of money from this situation. And maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but it's how that's difficult for some folks. Meaning a lot of these folks are using their county and local jails to house detainees or these folks who are going through the process.
Or private prisons.
Or private prisons, exactly right. They're being paid a certain amount of money on a head count per day. And they're making a pretty good amount of dough from this. Yeah, what's your feeling about that? Is it kind of a squishy thing in your stomach, or?
Well, I think it's a very sad commentary on just what a cheap date some of these local communities are, that they would establish what some have called concentration camps for children, specifically in facilities that are not designed for that.
That's right.
They're not designed for that.
They were made for
at
single
all.
men that were about to be deported.
Yeah,
That's right.
And the thing is, getting back to the question of how low can you sink in terms of what the public will put up with and the visuals that it will put up with, that's what's alarming, I think, about this administration. We go lower every day. And there seems to be no end in sight. And the reason is there's no recourse. There doesn't seem to be a recourse. For example, we need a comprehensive immigration, yes, but we just need emergency funding for the facilities at the border. And we need for the border personnel to follow the law, to turn over children to their to the HHS system within 72 hours rather than for a couple of days. But they're not doing that, and it's no wonder. We have an acting head of Homeland Security. We have an acting head of the Customs and Border Protection. We have immigration and customs personnel that's empty. It's total disarray, it seems, even to do what the law now requires.
That's an interesting point that list of those three agencies, the second one on your list, that person just resigned.
Right.
As a matter of fact, this past week. Interesting. Daniel, the money angle is interesting to me too. We're in essence, we meaning states like ours, are carrying out a federal mandate here, and it's unfunded, as we like to say. In a just world, we would get every penny of this. Is that going to happen? The governor has asked, our delegation has asked. Is it appropriate to expect reimbursement for all this?
Yeah, I mean, if you step in to do a job that someone else has asked you to do, you should be paid for the job.
Okay.
I don't know what else you could do, right? I mean, if you're going to have these facilities and you're going to have, and someone comes to you and says, I want to use the facility, they're going to pay you to use the facility. The interesting conversation about the pay part, though, is,
Please.
and I agree, I agree with the senator, something's got to be done. But I think maybe some of the congressmen and women who are busy opposing funding the stuff that the president has asked for to get more rooms, to get more houses, to get more beds, they don't have time to vote for that stuff. And they have time to strip all of that stuff, but they'll show up in their monumental photo opportunities to act like they really care about these individuals, and they don't. These folks are just political pawns for both sides. Nobody's looking to solve this. When Dee Dee says we just need some emergency funding, we've been emergency funding this for 25 years. I mean, immigration has been, and more importantly, immigration from South America has been a huge problem. I'm not denying that we're a big player at fault for that, right? I mean, this country's got to stop meddling in everybody else's business and stop deciding who's going to be in charge of what country. These are the ramifications of what happens. But I mean, I think, to the point about what the people in this country are tired of, I think we're going to just keep getting lower and lower because the people aren't listening. Why aren't the people listening? Because when you put a picture up and say, look at these kids in a cage, and Donald Trump is a horrible human being, and then you find out that picture was taken 7 years ago during the Obama administration, and nobody wants to have that conversation. I just think people are tired, and I think that's why we're missing the facts in all the stuff that's going on. We clearly, hold on a second, I didn't get the 20 minutes you
let's
got.
go.
We clearly have got to do something to address this issue. But the issue can't be, hey, we're just going to open the borders, we're just going to let everybody come in, and we'll figure it out after that. The courts have already ruled that he has the right to take those individuals. The government has the right to take the individuals that come across the border illegally, get them a date, take them back to Mexico, and let them go. And that's one of the reasons why the Mexican government has deployed 15,000 troops on their border to try to keep us from doing that. at some point, these pictures of these young people, these kids dying, being abused, something has to be done.
Yeah.
So I don't agree that people don't care. I mean, I think that's a very cynical view. I'm sure there's some people who have this falls on deaf ears, but I do think there's people who do care, and I hope that more and more people start to pay attention. And in particular, I want to highlight a couple of tweets that were, I think, important on the issue of the toothpaste and soap. Some of you may have heard of. Michael Scott Moore tweeted when that issue came up about, well, we don't think we have an obligation to give. He said when he was, he's a reporter, when he was kidnapped by Somali pirates, he said Somali pirates gave me toothpaste and soap.
Wow.
And in response to that tweet, David Rode, who was kidnapped by the Taliban, said, the Taliban gave me toothpaste and soap. Like, these are basic essentials.
Right.
And this is not the kind of country that we want to live in or that we want to be a part of. And I think that this is not a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be a humanitarian issue. And so these are basic conditions.
But I think when you refer, I think the problem that crosses the line is we continually hear the reference to concentration camps as an example. We heard at the table today, there's a huge difference between concentration camps.
Would it make
that
you feel better
happen-
if we called it
there's-
internment
there's-
camps? Because we've had
There's
those
a
in
big
New Mexico.
difference between those two. And so, but it's okay. It's funny how when the left wants to throw out this rhetoric, it's okay. We
It's
can just say whatever we
outrageous
want to
either
say.
way. I don't care
It's
what you
not-
call it,
there's
it's
But see,
outrageous.
for those that understand what happened in World War II and understand history, utilizing the term concentration camps is not only offensive, it's morally and
Internment
ethically wrong.
camps have
Doesn't
occurred in
matter.
New
You
Mexico.
can throw
These are
whatever term
terrible
out you want to
conditions
throw
for
out there.
children.
It doesn't matter. Nobody's denying that they're
semantics.
terrible.
It's an
No, it's not
issue.
semantics.
I think
Words
I think-
have a meaning. And when you throw out the term concentration camps, when your Congress people say,
I don't know
this is a
anybody here who did
concentration
that,
camp.
so I'm
Dee
not
Dee
sure
said it
what-
I did.
earlier.
I did.
Dee Dee said it earlier, so that's one here. You have Democrat
Look it up.
congressmen and
Look it
women
up
that
in the
say it.
dictionary.
They say,
I
I don't see
actually ask
anybody
you.
being murdered by the government at these concentration camps.
But
And the
there's people
concentration
that have,
camps.
there's
not what
children
they
who
were-
have hunger. There's been reports of hunger problems.
There's no doubt that there's problems. When you have
Deaths.
tens of
Deaths.
thousands of people
in Florida,
coming,
you have
when
a situation.
tens of
Here we're
thousands of
talking
people
about
coming.
We're
local
going to wrap this up in about
communities.
30
but
seconds.
we
Local
got-
communities that are having to foot the bill. In Florida, there's a camp called Homestead
Oh, yeah.
that, and they're actually privately run. So this is a company that's making money off of this situation, which also does not
Yeah.
sit well with a lot of people.
Yeah, Mike, you have a last word on
Well,
this?
semantics aside, I think, there's no question that this is a humanitarian crisis. And I don't think that anyone can effectively argue that it's being effectively or efficiently handled. And so regardless of what we call it, regardless of what terms we decide to settle on, and I don't know that it's necessary we must settle on some terms, the fact is that what's happening at the border is inexcusable. And that's something that we just need to address.
We're going to settle that right there. Just ahead, researchers right here at UNM are hot on the heels of a vaccine for Alzheimer's disease. We have one more chat with The Line, and we'll be talking about vaccinations of a different sort.